Welcome everybody, I'm Santiago Kneeland and this is The Divine Within, the invisible connection with God. In today's episode, we're gonna think, listen, and hear, and especially how do we hear from God? In today's episode, we're gonna answer one of the greatest questions. It's in one of the oldest questions in humanity that we've ever asked, and one that transcends religion, culture, and tradition. Is God distant, or is He constantly trying to reach us through or to us through the ordinary moments of our life? Today's guest, Richard Rosen, has spent decades exploring that very question. A professional musician, lifelong spiritual seeker, and dedicated student of the Urantia book. Richard's journey has taken him across continents and through a lifetime of experience that transformed this simple curiosity into a living relationship with God. Rather than offering formulas or dogma, Richard shares the quiet discoveries that taught him how to recognize the divine voice already present within every human heart. Together, we'll explore Richard's remarkable story, discover practical ways we can all become more attentive to God's guidance, and leave you with simple practices you can begin using today to deepen your own relationship with the divine. So, welcome, Richard. It's a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, Santiago.
So, we're going to be talking about a lot of interesting conversations and insights that you bring us. So let's dive into how you found God and your story. So in this segment titled How God Found Me, Richard is going to tell us that every spiritual journey has a beginning. Sometimes it arrives through hardship, sometimes through wonder, and sometimes we discover that we weren't searching for God nearly as much as He has been searching for us. Richard begins by sharing the experiences that transformed a curious young man into someone who learned to recognize the quiet presence of the divine throughout his life. So, Richard, what can you tell us about this experience and your process into listening and hearing from God?
Well, I'll start, Santiago, by commenting on how you introduced the podcast as a way for people to recognize how God works in our lives. Because when I was a young man, I did not know God existed. And I would have liked a podcast like you're doing to hear from people that have actually had real experiences with God in their life and how that works. But back then, there was no internet. And all I knew as a teenager is there was something more than the material world. I just knew that. I didn't know what it was. And then through a series of events, I ended up in northern Maine. I'm a Jewish kid from Brooklyn.
Okay.
So for me to end up in northern Maine, living on the edge of the Allagash wilderness with a few other families, and what attracted me to them is they were the most real people I ever had met. They were looking for reality, and they were doing it Eastern way, for example, the Eastern religion, Eastern philosophy, the gurus. I never knew anything about that, but I said, okay, let me give it a try. I like the people. So I had a vision one night. I never had this before. I have never had one since. It was so real. And here I was in the land of Israel. I was sitting on a horse. My hands were tied behind my back, and I had a noose over my head. And there were several men around us, and then one I had a switch that was going to switch out the horse, and I was going to hang. I said to them, don't do this, not for my sake, but for your sake. Because by that time, I knew there was more than this life. And after this life, there had to be something more. Didn't know what it was.
Okay.
So anyway, the switch went down, the horse went out. And the next thing I knew, I was flying like Superman over this most beautiful valley. Just exquisite. And I thought, so this is what happens when you die.
That's really interesting. And how did this come about? Or I mean, you moved and you started a new experience and Eastern philosophies. Were you in a meditation, or did you? How did all this come about? More or less, what was your age when you had this experience?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I was in my early 20s, and I was studying like the I Ching from Taoism. And meditation, I tried it. It wasn't for me. All that mysticism I have a scientific kind of mind. I want to see the physics behind something. And all this merging, and it's like, am I going to spend my whole life meditating to try to get to this place that the gurus are? It wasn't for me, and I knew enough it wasn't for me, but I didn't know what else there was. So
Okay.
that set the stage for looking back, I know what happened. See, with each of us, there lives a fragment of infinity, of the divine God, who has our whole life planned out for us. I didn't know that, of course, but he knew that. And because I had been thinking along these lines of what comes next, he was able to, this is what I believe, he was able to allow this vision to take place. It was from him. Yeah, I'm convinced of that. So, so that was the first real experience I had with what I would call reality, spiritual reality. So anyway, again, I finally said, all this Eastern stuff is not for me, like I mentioned. I said, it got to be something else. So I did something for a Jewish kid like me that would be unthinkable. I picked up the New Testament to see, well, what is this book about? I mean, in those days, I couldn't even say the name Jesus because being Jewish is like almost, it was like anathema. Anyway, so I'm reading the New Testament, reading about Jesus. And as far as I'm concerned, all these healings and miracles, that's like Superman. No problem. The gurus, they do it. Why not him? So, but one thing caught my attention that I've remembered ever since that has guided my life. I was reading when he was talking about if you have hatred in your heart, it is the same as killing someone, same as murder.
Okay.
That hit home, Santiago. It was like, wow. See, looking back with what I know now, I know, again, the spirit within was making that come alive to me, and I couldn't deny it. I didn't have a problem with anger. I wasn't angry, but occasionally anger would come out, and I thought, I do not want to hurt anybody. And I like what he said. And then I read, if you have lust in your heart after a woman, it's the same as committing adultery. Well, I was a young man. I had plenty of lust in my heart. I said, whoa, I don't want to assault women in my spirit. It was real. I don't want to do it. And then I had this thought, and this is what guided me for the rest of my life. I said, I want someone to tell me what to do, how to live. So I always do the right thing. That's what I want. I said, Jesus, this guy had these things. He was telling people how to live. So I became interested.
Yeah.
So that spring, the group I was with, they sent me down. I went down to Brooklyn to visit my mother. And they said on the way back, that summer actually, bring back 50 pounds of honey for the following winter. That's what we use. So I looked on the phone, and I was going to come back with the sister of one of the people there. So I looked in the phone book, and I found this honey farm in Saddle River, New Jersey. I don't know anything about Saddle River. I don't know anything about New Jersey. But she picked me up. We went out there, and it was getting late. And so we got lost in this neighborhood of homes. They were more expensive and exquisite than I had ever seen in my lower middle class Brooklyn background. And because it is getting dark, and here I am, long hair, beard, clothes that only a woodsman would love.
Yeah.
I said to her,
in the middle of this neighborhood, in the middle of this fancy neighborhood.
Yeah. So I said to her, what I now recognize was a prayer. I didn't know anything about prayer, of course. I said, let's hope we pick a house where they don't get freaked out at our coming at this time with what I look like. So I knocked on this door, and an older gentleman opens, and I said, look, we're looking for this honey farm. And we got lost. Can you help us? He said, yes. Why don't you come in?
Okay.
It's like,
not only did he not freak out, he let you in. So this is good.
He invited me in. So anyway, I said, and since you already been in a row, why don't you have a cup of coffee? We'll talk a little bit. So we went with the flow. And then we were talking about, again, because I was spiritually minded, he said, I want you to have my 2 sons come in and talk to you, because they had, and they related a near-death experience they had in a car crash. And then it was about angels and celestial beings and the other world. And it was like, I thought, this is what I'm looking for. Someone that actually has had experience, not in a book.
Not in theory, but the actual practice, right?
Yeah, he knew about angels. He spoke with
Okay.
authority. He understood the celestial life.
Okay.
So then he said, well, look, it's by this time, it's probably 9:00. It's getting dark. He said, you got all the way up to Maine to travel. Why don't the two of you stay overnight here?
Okay.
Now something happened, which is not uncommon. Fear hit me. The
Okay.
supernatural. I refused. I said, no, I was just scared. So we went outside. He said, okay. He called up the honey farmer. It's late. He said, these two are coming over. My sons are going to lead them. They want some honey. So he was prepared. We get outside. The car won't start. This
Okay.
Volkswagen always started afterwards. This is the only time it didn't start. Now, one of the principles I have for my life is when there's a scripture reference that says, in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses is a matter established.
Okay.
Well, that's what this was like, Santiago. It was
this is good, and I've heard this before, or something similar to this.
Yeah.
And yes, please explain this, because I think this is very interesting.
Patterns of coincidence.
Exactly.
I wasn't spiritual then, of course, so I couldn't recognize it, and the fear would prevent it anyway. So anyway, we go off to the honey farm, get there about probably 10:00.
Mm-hmm.
Honey farmer says, it's late. Why don't you stay overnight? Oh, that
Yes.
was.
There's no more. There's no more. You can't go against that. Yes. Okay. So
Right.
this is interesting.
Anyway,
So please.
the fear was still there, so we went off. Anyway, over the winter, I wrote him a letter. I unburdened my heart. He wrote back. It was just a wonderful correspondence. And the next spring, I hitchhiked down. He brought me to a meeting. It was a Bible meeting, a Christian Bible meeting. A remarkable teacher. I'd never been anything like that in my life before. But he spoke about Israel, which in all my years of Hebrew learning and so forth, I never knew what he taught in just 2 hours. And then he did something that is the cream upon, or the icing upon the cake. That's the word. After the meeting was over, he said, this is somebody's living room, probably 15 people. He said, clear away the chairs. And then he had people come up one at a time. He put their hands on their head and they would fall backwards. Oh my goodness. I was embarrassed for them. He said, no, take a look. Look, and so there were about 3 or 4 people, they put sheets over him for modesty. And then he said, would you like to try it? So Santiago, at this point, the fear has left. I'm just thrilled because he had a white robe on, had a long beard. He looked just like a guru. So it was like God set it up, just what I needed, to the right person at the right time. It wasn't a church, which I would probably not be comfortable with my Jewish background. Just a living room. He said, would you like to give it a try? I said, yeah, okay. At this time, I trusted him. So he put his hands on my head. I felt the lightness, and I knew I could resist it, but I didn't. I said, let me see where it goes, because I wanted some real experience, spiritual experience. Down I go. And then he says, do you want to talk to God? Do you want to talk to Jesus? Oh, no. Do you want to talk to God? I think he said. Then I said, what do I know? How do I know? He said, here's what you do. Just say, and just speak like from the heart, but in your own language. And I did. Oh, I was just pouring out my heart. There was this 14-year-old girl right next to me. And he says to her, translate. And she then starts talking in English, the things that I'm talking in this tongue only known to me. And I'm listening to her say what I'm saying. So after that was over, he said, well, what do you want to do? He said, I'm staying. And I stayed there for 25 years. And that
really,
was,
this is really interesting.
Yeah. When God wants you and you are willing to be found, he sets up the circumstances. And all you have to do is recognize it and go with the flow.
So you were led, and like you're saying, these are the not a series of patterns. Finally, I mean that basically we're saying you stay here and go this path, and you had an experience, an epiphany, which is very interesting. And I can share one, and I'll share one in a little bit. But what's really interesting is that from your Jewish background, especially, I mean, you weren't really familiar with any. I mean, you had read about Jesus and you had studied the New Testament, but you hadn't grown up in that environment. Suddenly, you were in this church, uh, dealt in this rapture, let's say that or not rapture, but in this bliss that you found.
I was
So
in a spiritual state, Santiago. It was like
okay,
my mind, I left the material worldliness that's normal to us, and I raised up in my mind to experience what I just there, which is very normal, but not as dramatic as this is. I needed the
mm,
drama because that's what it took to get me.
yeah, I have a similar experience. Maybe later on I'll tell about it. But yes, I did have one time. Well, I'll tell real quick. We had and I, like you did, one of the paths that I took was into the Native American tradition. So it was the concept of a great spirit, and a lot of rituals of the like dancing and well, not dancing, but going into like the sweat lodges and all that. So that really got you into a really interesting frequency. And I had a similar experience where we were in a fire ceremony, and boom, I just felt going into a cloud and sort of flying as well. I just
Hmm.
can say I felt God. It was just
Yes.
like a total ecstasy. It was total bliss. So this is interesting. And yeah, from that moment on, my quest has been to find that and to understand better that experience. So in the end, what happened afterwards? I mean, these 25 years. I
Okay.
mean, before we go into the details, but what did you do in these 25 years? I
Yeah.
mean, we'll go into details about the core of this story, but afterwards, during that time.
Yeah. Well, uh, he made God come alive. That was
Okay.
like the next morning. He says to me, Santiago, he says, "Do you want to see God?" I said, "Okay." He said, "Look in your mind. What do you see?" Oh, I saw a man in a throne with a white beard and a flowing robe. you know. And of course, from my perspective, that's all my indwelling spirit, because that's who
Hmm.
showed it to me. That's all I could see. I was a
Yeah.
child in these things, you know. So, and he said, good. And then, but he made him come alive. It's like he would talk, he would tell about how God in his life, God told him to do this and God showed him that. And then he did this. And I said, if God could work with him that way, that's what I want. Because that was my prayer without knowing it up in Maine. I want someone to tell me how to live right and what to do all the time. And he was demonstrating. And that's what I learned under him, how real God in our life is. He's a father, and it's not theoretical. There's a genuine connection that he's put in there. If you desire hunger for truth and your thirst to do the right thing all the time, he finds you and then you find him. Uh, so
Correct.
that gave me a foundation, and also gave me a foundation in the Bible, which, although there are limitations to it, there's so much truth in it. I mean, it was the greatest repository of truth 2,000 years ago that existed among all the religions. And again, God leads us step by step. So 15 years into this experience, uh, he's teaching wonderful truths. And I'm in the office with a coworker who's also part of our congregation. And I see this big blue book open on his desk. It was this book.
Okay.
It was
Hmm.
just open at random. I read one little bit, a page. I said, "Bill, where did you get this book?" The spirit of truth in us is so alive that when you come across truth, it just like, whoa. And this was like a download, just on one little page I read. So I bought the book, and it turns out many pastors, ministers, they teach out of, this was the Urantia book, and many pastors or teachers teach out of it. They use it, but they don't tell their congregations. But in this case, somebody knew about it, and the word got out, so he told everybody. I'm
Okay.
teaching from the Urantia book. But of the 200 or so people, I would say maybe not more than 3, 4, or 5 ever really did anything with it, because it's not an easy book, but it can be an easy book. So, but it took me 10 years to basically recognize, Christian doctrine is so strong, some of it, and I just could not release. I was afraid. Fear dominated my life quite a bit, as I told you. It's still there.
Yeah.
It was only after he died that I finally was able to make the break and say, as beautiful as the Bible is, with so many truths, the Urantia book just put it all together in ways I couldn't. And I would say what really confirmed it, actually, this is a principle in my life, Santiago. I know truth is confirmed when it changes my life. I became a better person as I understood more the truths of the Urantia book. And because I had an even stronger connection with God, I knew how to actually love and practice, not in theory, and master my thoughts and my emotions. So the only thing that comes out is what comes from on top, from the higher mind. Then it comes out and expresses the way it should, for good, for service, to do good to others. And
No,
so,
this is really good, because you finally found, and through your own way of processing that you mentioned, of a lot of the science of learning about it, you were able to understand and get into this dynamic. It went from just theory, or from just the concept, into a practice that you finally learned and perfected in a way.
yes, right. And it's an ongoing progress, spiritual growth, as you know, Santiago. And so I think in terms of spiritual milestones, and we all have them in our lives. And so the first milestone was I was introduced to God. I found out he was really alive, and he's a person. You got to have a relationship with him. The second was the introduction to the Urantia book, because that's just made everything. Our minds are always chattering. They're incessantly talking, and and that's what meditation is designed to do. Of course, is quiet things down. So, so I came across the idea of stillness some years later, probably about maybe a dozen years ago, really understanding how to still my mind in order to prepare the way to invite God to talk to me. It's like that indwelling spirit. It's not like he talks to you like, oh, hey, Santiago, I want to tell you something today.
Yeah.
No, he's not going to tell
It's
you
a
like
different
that.
communication.
It's a still, small voice.
The still small voice. I like that.
You got to be quiet, and that's where stillness. So I came across this 7 steps of.
Well, let's leave it there, because this is so good that and this is so great to a great segue into the next point. So stick around. We're gonna find out exactly what's this process and how you can hear from God. Stick around.
On the Divine Within podcast, we share real conversations to help you find a personal connection with God. My goal is to support your faith, growth, and journey toward discovering the divine within yourself. Join us to deepen your faith and spiritual journey.